again, thank you for having me up here for, I think I've got tenure here at this point, probably. I've given enough talk. I appreciate you guys coming out like this. It's nice to talk to a live audience. Or a non-Zoom audience, maybe that's what I'm talking about.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Say that today.
Yeah, I teach a lot of classes on Zoom now at the university. We do a lot of distance stuff now. I still do my field trips and labs, but I was teaching class recently, and a young lady in the class, her mother, walked by in the background, stopped, looked into the screen, and goes, "Your professor looks like Walt Disney." I'm still not entirely sure how to take that. It's like the things you learn in Zoom classes. All right, so let's begin. So I titled this talk, Columbia, the 19%. What's that in reference to? Any guess?
Portion of the world's bird species that are found in Colombia.
Perfect, yeah. So almost 20% of the world's bird species have been recorded in Colombia at one point or another, and that's a pretty astounding thing. And one of whom is the chestnut piculet, which is this gorgeous little miniature woodpecker, and found this up on the Guajira Peninsula, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And I'm going to do the not so humble brag. I actually got this picture published in Birding Magazine, which was really exciting. So this is the best picture. It's all downhill from here. So we'd start high and just slide the rest of the way. Just before we talk about avian diversity, Colombia, depending upon whose list you look at, a little over 1,900 species recorded out of about 10,500 on Earth. That's just an astounding number to me. So it's about 19% of the world's total. As the genesis keeps splitting things, it'll probably keep that same proportion, by the way. A lot of these are endemic birds there. Let's look at size for a minute. Colombia is about 1.14 million, 4 million square kilometers. For comparison, Texas is about 677,000. So it's nearly twice the size of Texas. It's a big country, but it's still smaller than Alaska. Now, if you look at the US and Canada, minus Hawaii, I have a hard time counting Hawaii and US still for birds, we record over 900 species in this huge landmass. Yet Colombia, smaller than Alaska, has 1,000 more species present. I just get boggled by that, to cram all those species into that space. So how do you get that 19% in a landmass that size? The first part of the answer is landscape diversity. You have everything from pelagic ocean birds, you have shorebirds, you've got marshes of different types, savannas, you've got all these elevational changes. There's high alpine mountains in Colombia, then you've got the big Amazon basin on the east side. And so there's just a tremendous number of habitat niches for birds to occupy. And so as they compete and subdivide and speciate, you get all these species. Combine that with migration. So birds that come up here to nest return to Colombia for the winter, so they pick up a whole bunch of neotropical migrants. And then there are birds from southern South America that migrate north to Colombia. So they really get two different sets of migrants. And it inflates this number of species to remarkable levels. And Colombia is among the top 5 most diverse for bird species on Earth. So this talk, I combined 2 trips I took there. In 2018 and 19, they were less than a year apart even. And this gentleman here is Osvaldo Cortez, and he's a biologist who also does bird guiding on the side to help fund his ornithology. And so he worked on unusual species like velvet-fronted grackles. He helped discover a new species of amphida to science in Colombia. And so I always tell my students, he did that before he was 30. What have you done? Get going. Better work harder. So I contacted him off the internet, and I actually found him through eBird. He just posted a whole bunch of lists on eBird, so I just kind of Googled him and was like, oh, okay. So I said, I'm an ornithologist, I'd like to come down and check out birds. So a couple of us went down there. First trip, 2018, covered the central, north, and northeastern portions of Colombia. 2 weeks saw 461 species. That is a tremendous number of birds in 2 weeks. An Oklahoma big ear is what, like 350, records like 370 species over an entire year. You see 461 in 2 weeks. About 129 of those were life birds that I had not seen before. And I'd been to the tropics and other places, so I picked up a lot of other tropical birds first, but that's still a lot of life birds for a couple weeks. And a lot of really neat specialties, which I wanted to see. 2019 went back. This was just a short spring break trip. Went to Mitu in the Amazon, and then spent a little bit of time outside Bogota on the slopes there in the mountains. So that was just 7 days, saw 291 species, 64 of which were life birds, and most of those were down in the Amazon. So you jump on the plane in Dallas. Here's Colombia, Northwest South America. You can see pretty good sized country there. Zooming in a little bit tighter here. So here's Bogota. You fly in here, and you've got the Andean mountains stringing along through here. So birded around here, the inter-Andean valleys and these slopes all have different bird communities. Then came up to the northern part here and worked out to the Guajira Peninsula, which is really unusual. And also the Santa Marta Mountains, which we'll talk about a little bit as well. It's an isolated mountain range at the north end of the Andes, so lots of endemic bird species. And then the second trip was down here to Mitu. There are no roads there. There's no highways. You have to fly in and out of this little town to go birding there. And you just go to the edge of town and just walk out. There's no special reserves and all this stuff. You're just out there. Getting a light show. Okay. So 2018 flew in, had enough time in the afternoon to swing by a marsh near the airport. So get off the plane, stretch your legs, do a little birding. We went mainly for the Colombian rail, which we did find, but I didn't get any good imagery of it really. So I settled for an American coot, which you can see over here at your local lakes. You notice it is a little bit differently colored though. You see the yellow on the top of the bill. This is actually a potential split, a genetic split between the South American and North American forms. They haven't done it yet, but it wouldn't surprise me if that happens. So our first day out, we went up to a national park called Sumapaz. It's higher elevation. You can see 4,300 meters here on the side. So you're talking about 14,000 feet. And you get up into habitat called Paramo. And it's kind of a combination of tundra, alpine tundra mixed in with some shrub vegetation. And then there were some other elevational habitats there as well. By the way, I love high elevation. I grew up on flat, low prairies of Kansas, but I really like being up in the mountains a lot. Kind of get a bit away from everything. So here's a good scenery shot. We pulled up a little parking area. This was our breakfast nook, look out in the parking area. And you can see it's sparsely vegetated, but all very unique types of plant species and a bird community to go with it. Here's a little brown-backed chat tyrant, which is a type of flycatcher. And chat tyrants are often found at higher elevation. And so it's perched on this little this kind of Spanish bayonet or yucca type vegetation. And they'll sally out and catch insects that are emerging. And a lot of the Paramo is actually very wet. So there's a lot of actually standing water or moist areas, and there's emergent insects they can forage on. Another group that you find up at the higher elevation are birds like Sierra finches. And this is the Plumbeous Sierra finch. It's all gray, little seed-eating bill for crunching up seeds. It's a granivore. And then there's other birds called seed eaters that they're often mixed in flocks with. You're going to find this kind of select community. This was on like an old fence post, just popped up. So usually you see them as a cloud of birds just flying away from you. So anytime they sit up, it's kind of nice. In some of the scrubbier habitat, we found this white-throated tyrannulet. And tyrannuletes are a whole group of tropical flycatchers. They're usually very small, kind of like our Impidinax, like Acadian flycatcher, least flycatcher, they're in that size range. They have a very tiny bill for a flycatcher, but it was darting around, jumping out, grabbing little insects. So nice little look at it. Pretty well camouflaged with the olive and the white blending in with the different leaves. And that bird actually is as close as it really appears. It's only about maybe 6 feet away. Just kind of sits still, and sometimes the birds just pop up and come to you. You know what kind of bird that is? They're kind of fun. These are ant pinners. They're kind of jokingly referred to as an egg on legs. It's real oval shape, or look like a bowling pin, I guess, also. And they do have these very strong, powerful legs, and they can fly. but they typically hop or ricochet like a kangaroo. They just jump on two legs. They can go very fast. And they eat things like spiders, beetles, and other invertebrates from the surface of the ground. In lower elevations, antpidas can be very secretive, really skulking. You kind of hear them and don't see them as much. But the high elevation tawny antpida shown here, they're really easily seen in this environment. So it's always fun to see antpidas up close. Some of the lodges, they'll put out like mealworms and stuff on trails to get the antpidas to come out of the forest so you can see them. But up here, you can just see them without any kind of gimmickry. We did flush an imperial snipe, which is a very secretive bird up there. I about jumped out of my boots. You know, they just pop out from under your feet at the last second. You're like, oh my gosh. Good camouflage.
Wow.
See, the one picture that's not mine, everybody oohs and ahs. I did not get a good enough picture of this, so I stole this off Google Images. I'll be candid. This is the green-bearded helmet crest hummingbird. And it's a high-altitude specialist, and it's an absolute rock star in terms of what it looks like. And so you see the neat little gorget, the iridescent throat patch. It's kind of a greenish blue. Real short, sharp, needle-like bill for a hummingbird. It's really cool crest marks. Look how long the wings are, the tail projection. And people tend to think of hummingbirds as being in tropical lowlands, things like that. This is 12, 13, 14,000 feet up, and there's multiple hummingbird species up there. So they adapt in all sorts of different conditions.
So do they not migrate then? They just stay right there?
Yeah, a lot of them are resident at those elevations. Now, some are altitudinal migrants. They'll be up here for part of the season, perhaps for nesting, and then they go in the dry season down to a lower elevation, so they'll follow food sources. So that can happen, but a lot of them are just resident year-round up there. Good question. Altitudinal migration makes it tougher for management. You have to protect multiple areas. You can't just say, this one area is good, we're fine. You can't ignore those others, so it's a little more challenging. Bronze-tailed thornbill. Absolutely stunning bronze down the back here. White eye spot. And much like the helmet crest, a very short, needle-like, very small bill. And most of the flowers up there are very tiny. Okay, so they don't need a huge bill. You only have to go this far to get the nectar for the plant. Dropping down in altitude, I just wanted to put in this one photo from Bella Vista. It's white-mantled barbets, and they're endemic to Colombia. And endemic means they're found only in one location. So they've only been recorded inside the country of Colombia. Now, the bird doesn't care about the political boundaries of the country, of course, but people seem obsessed with it, but birds are like, whatever. So anyway, it was neat. We were going through this reserve, and it was really rainy and cloudy that day, but a flock of white-mantled barbets showed up and kind of overhead here. And barbets have these really kind of heavy, kind of oblong bills. They're usually kind of raucous in groups, and these were real chattery. And white mantle's on the back, so you can't actually see the field mark it's named for, but they have neat red on the crown, these bibbed appearances, and it's always exciting to see. And birds like the endemics because, you know, the stuff you can see anywhere in the tropics, you're going to see at some point, but these specialties, you really got to hit them at that spot. Spent a little bit of time at Rio Claro. This was a nature reserve, and I wanted to point out, it's going to be hard to see from the audience, but the sign right here of what's prohibited. From the left, it starts with dogs, no pets, not on leashes, not in car, no pets, period. It's a reserve, it's for wildlife. They don't want animals chasing stuff around or barking. That's an old-fashioned boombox, stereo. No loud music, and they're not playing around. No radios playing in the cars. It's nature sounds. It's not there for a concert. So they have enforcement. No liquor, they're very specific about that apparently. No bottles, no glass, none of that stuff is allowed in. No firearms, okay, it's a reserve. They do have problems with poaching in a number of these reserves. People will sneak on and poach game birds or try to capture parrots, things like that for the illegal pet trade. So if you're toting firearms, that's a big no-no. And Colombia's had more than its share of violence in the past, so they're not fooling around. No styrofoam. I think we need to adapt that to no plastics now, probably also. But you go inside, and there's not trash everywhere. You know, drive down roads in Oklahoma, we got trash everywhere. people have kind of throwaway culture. They're really trying to keep these pristine. I give them full props. Oh, barred puffbird. The barring is pretty easy. And puffbirds can be kind of really, I guess I'll call them silent. They often sit very quietly on branches, not a lot of movement, can be kind of cryptic. But once you do lock onto them, they have these really kind of funky appearances. And there was a pair of barred puffbirds along the trail there. And this one held still long enough to get a picture made. I'd say puffbirds are one of those things you go hoping to see, but if you try to find them, you usually don't see them. You just sort of happen to, all of a sudden they're just right there in front of you. So just let them come to you. So here we have a nest of a common toady flycatcher. Do you see the common toady flycatcher? There we go. Down here, this little black and yellow job. They're real tiny. They're just a little bit bigger than gnatcatchers. And this was an active nest. When I first looked at that nest, it looks like an old one kind of falling apart, doesn't it? But it's basically mimicking an old bad nest. So you got all this stuff kind of hanging off it. But they were going in and out of that nest routinely. I also like the fact that this photo shows all the vegetative diversity. If you look around, there's vines, there's all sorts of trees, there's all sorts of other vegetation, lianas. And you think about all the different niches for birds and all the plant diversity. That's how that builds. Common toady flycatcher is common. It's widespread in the tropics. But it's the first time I found a nest. Just about any open area in the tropics, if you look a little bit, you'll find saffron finches. And they have this beautiful yellow, and they have a little bit of orange in the crown, especially on the boys. And they're a seed-eating finch, just kind of like we have house finches here and things like that. And they habituate to people really easily. So you'll see them in towns as well, things like that. Tropics are famous for tanagers. This is the flame-rumped tanager, and it's got the tanager body plan, this nice deep dark black. You have a bluish or light bluish bill, and then the yellow rump, basically. Now, if you go to Western Colombia, flame-rumped tanagers have a red rump. These have a yellow rump. In the middle, orange. Does that remind you of anything here in Oklahoma? Flickers. You got red-shafted flickers out west, yellow-shafted flickers east, and they integrate in the middle. Currently, they lump these all as one species, a flame-rumped tanager. I've seen them on both slopes. I've heard them, watched them. They really should be split. They don't sound the same. Their habitats are a little bit different. They don't look the same. I think the justices just haven't got around to really getting that one right yet, but I think they will. When they're split by that mountain range, the amount of gene flow back and forth is often nil or minimal at best. So they're really genetically isolated. It was eating the fruits in this tree, by the way, and it gets pigments from carotenoids, and it'll develop into these bright yellows, reds, oranges they get in their plumage. There's a whole heck of a lot of hummingbirds in Colombia. This will be a little hummingbird heavy tonight, but I don't think anybody will object to that, I hope. This is a fairly widespread species, rufous-tailed hummingbird. You see the nice little rufous tail here, real green, kind of a pinkish black bill. There were some feeders at a lodge, and so it's always good to stop at the feeders and get all the hummingbirds. I like to try to the trails, so I feel like I saw them in the wild, not just come into a feeder. But yeah, it's all good. This is what I've been looking for a little while. It's white-vented plumellitere. That's a mouthful. And you see the white underneath here. It's a fairly large, iridescent, greenish blue hummingbird. And I was just excited to see one. Like, I've been looking for a while for this little guy. And you can see a little bit of the tongue sticking out there when we get out in western Oklahoma. It was just always surprised me how tiny these little flycatchers get sometimes. Look at the bill. I always point out to my students, it's really flat and triangular shaped. That's kind of a classic shape and structure for flycatchers to snap down on flying insects. And then they go to a branch and then they beat it to death on the branch and eat it. If you don't really have teeth, you don't have fingers, you gotta kind of utensils, you gotta make do. So it looks a little rough, but it works. I have a woodpecker thing. So this is a cinnamon woodpecker. Walking down a trail, turned a corner, and it's from me to the little tripod there, just frozen. Like it saw us, we saw it, froze, and it's looking kind of over its shoulder. And I was afraid to move because I didn't want to flush it. And so it resulted in getting a photo with a viney stick right through the bill of the bird, which, from a photography standpoint, that's not so good. But the rest of it's really exciting. Look at the cool little barring on the tail, which it uses as a strut against the trunk of the tree. This gorgeous cinnamon color. And here's the bill and the eye, but notice the back of the head. It essentially has like a crest on the back of the head. And I'm postulating, I think it's actually mimicry. I think it's designed to fool potential predators. It looks kind of like a bill, doesn't it? Which way is this bird going to go? If you're a predator flying through and you see, it may give you a second's hesitation. That may be all the woodpecker needs to get away. I've never tried to prove this or test it, but I think there may be merit to it. And it's common in this genus, the Celeus genus. And we'll see another one later on. If you go to the tropics, moths are always crowd pleasers. I chopped off the tail in this photo. They have really long tails like a scissor tail flycatcher, but just think longer and bigger. And this is the rufous moth. And it's got this, again, the really beautiful rufous coloration here, the black cheek, really heavy bill, black spot. This is a green. And they'll perch, and they'll either fly catch or they'll fly down to the ground and grab things out of the mud. It's almost like a forest kingfisher in a way, the way it behaves. And they have really cool, funky whoop, 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 whoop calls. Another location in the central portion there of the country, Combema Canyon. I showed this photo. You think, okay, that looks like a really mountainous tropical area. But if you look at the photo really closely, there's almost no original habitat there. It's all been cut down and is growing back in different forms. So the original forest that covered these slopes and everything, almost all of it's been removed. This is all secondary regrowth. And some of this is actually like goat grazing pasture. And so what you have to do is you have to find the little pockets of the original habitat that are still around, and that's where all the neat birds are going to be. The open disturbed habitats, that's going to have pretty common birds that you see everywhere. So you have to look for these little fragmented patches to see the neat stuff, or neater stuff. That's a better way to do it. Type of bird? Mott. Yeah. This is the Andean mott. Very different color palette except for the base green. You see the blue in the tail, the blue crown, this bright red eye. A much smaller bill than the rufous, and it's a little smaller body sized. And this is another one of those you suddenly just kind of turn and there's a bird sitting right in front of you. And you're trying to discreetly take a picture without scaring it off. That was less than 10 feet away. And I'm a walking birder. I like to walk and wander, but sometimes you just kind of hang out when birds are around, especially in the tropics. Sometimes they just kind of come in and gravitate. It's like fishing. Are you active or are you passively fishing? Do a little bit of both. More hummingbirds. This is a fawn-breasted brilliant. Brilliant implies it's bright and shiny. It's not really that bright and shiny. They're both the same species here, but they kind of get a little bit of a glow in the right light, which is where the name comes from. And brilliants are usually kind of middle elevation. You'll find those zones. This is why we hiked up a really, really steep part of this canyon, was to find indigo-capped hummingbird. And it's endemic to Colombia, and it's just in this valley. Okay, outside that, nowhere else in the world. And so they've got this little indigo cap, all green, a little bit of white ankles, and getting a really good look here. You can see it's all very cloudy and misty in the background, but this one perched up, and if you perch up like that, you're going to get your picture taken. And I love this photo. I'm going to bring it myself again, sorry. But it turned, it gives you the profile view. You can see pretty much the whole bird. It's, again, some Gene Simmons from Kiss tongue action there. But it was cleaning its bill after a foraging bout. And, it's a little bit messy back here, but birds get a little bit messy. They have to preen all that out, smooth all those feathers. But, this was a very accommodating hummingbird. It sat there for about 3 or 4 minutes. And a lot of times they just sit for a few seconds. This one was just kind of taking its time. Another tanager, the not so excitingly named scrub tanager, but it's a really pretty bird. You have these really cool infusions of greens and blues against the kind of buffy background. It's kind of orangish brown or chestnut crown. You can see it's raining, and the water dripping. It's eating a plantain. We were sitting on the porch of a lodge, just kind of staying out of the rain for a few minutes. Sometimes the tanagers just come in and eat fruit. So, and that's the teaser for this bird. We had a whole day planned of hiking obscure, steep trails looking for a Tolima dove. And as the rain broke, one just walked out of the forest into the wide open. They like walking around the deepest, darkest parts of the forest and skulking. And it's like, oh, there's one. Sometimes the world just turns exactly right for you. We still spent the rest of the day hiking all those trails and birding. We didn't just turn around and go home and check a bird off our list. We still went around looking for them. If you've been to South Texas, like the Rio Grande Valley, they have the white-tipped dove. Some of you may be familiar with that species. It's a relative of that. They look fairly similar, but it's only found in that valley. Now, another famous birding valley is the Magdalena Valley, and it's very birdy. There's a lot of habitat remaining still in the valley that's been protected, so obviously that's going to concentrate a lot of cool birds. This is a bar-crested ant shrike, and there are many things with the word ant in the name in the tropics. There's ant birds, ant wrens, ant vireos, ant shrikes, ant thrushes, ant pittas, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And ant shrikes, these are fairly accommodating ones. You'll see them kind of more out in the open. They're not as skulking. And a lot of them have this zebra-striped pattern, and they have different colored eyes or crest features. Their songs are really distinctive. You learn them pretty quick, at least the type of song. Ideally, especially in the tropical lowlands, you find ant swarms, and then all these different ant birds will come in, and as the insects get flushed by the ant swarm, they'll dart in and grab the flying insects or the ones that are running away. They don't eat the ants. And there's hundreds of species of these ant birds. And so when you study to go, you spend a lot of pages looking at ant thingies over and over, and a lot of them look the same. They're a challenge, but I like the challenge. So right after that, it started raining again, and when the rain stopped, that's optimal birding time. Those birds have been hunkered down in the rain, they're going to come up and dry off, and they're going to preen. So you start scanning the tops of everything, and you start to see a lot of birds rapidly. That's always fun. So fairly close by, a green thorntail, which is a type of hummingbird, popped up. And you see these really cool forked tails, and it's a greenish black bird, kind of a medium-sized bill. And it came out and put on a whole preening show, trying to get all straightened out after the rain. Light wasn't good, but I like silhouette pictures, so I'm good with it. Woodpecker bias again. This is the exact same foot placement as the green thorntail hummingbird picture. I just started to turn, woodpecker flies up, and you can see the name here, spot-breasted woodpecker. It wasn't a life bird for me. I've seen them before. They're fairly widespread, but this one, I couldn't be happier. You got this great red and white facial marking. You got some catch light in the eye, which gives it that personality. You got the angle of the bill, the bird's alert, forked tails. For you photographers, the framing, you got this nice little framing portraiture. This kind of helps pull your eye back down in. Even though it's slightly out of focus, no magazine would ever publish that photo. They would Photoshop it out. But it does help keep the bird kind of in the portrait zone. But if you removed it, it would be a different picture. But still, I don't Photoshop photos. I've got this weird soapbox. I take pictures to remember them exactly as they were. That's the narrative story for me. I feel like if I keep changing things and changing light and all this stuff, then it's no longer what I really saw. So I'm a weird old school neo-Luddite about that. I've seen pictures in magazines of birds. I was like, it almost looks cartoonish sometimes. They're so Photoshopped, they're not real to me anymore. It's like, we might as well just do illustrations, which is okay too. Here's a weird one. These are northern screamers. And yes, they do have a very loud vocalization. There's only 3 species in the family Anhymidae, and this was my second species of screamer, which was kind of cool in a wetland area in the bottom of the valley. When ornithologists first described this, they thought they might be related to things like guans and chachalakas, curassows, basically like turkey-like ground-dwelling birds, because they're kind of their knobby knees and legs and appearance. Other ornithologists looked at it and said, they kind of have some waterfowl-like traits, though. And they finally did the genetics on these guys and figured out their closest relative is something called a magpie goose. Not in Colombia, but in Australia and New Guinea. So these are very distant relatives and they're very isolated from each other, but they're even more isolated from everything else. So they're actually a little bit tilted more towards the waterfowl hypothesis. So that's kind of cool. And you can see they have these ridiculous knobby knees. It's a cool pink bill, sure, they have a little flare at the back. They got personality. This particular spot, the landowner protected them. People do shoot, kill, and eat them. And he didn't want people to do that, so they're on his little wetland property, and he chases people off that want to try to eat them. So, good for him. Around marshes in the tropics, especially northern South America, you see white-headed marsh tyrant. It's a type of flycatcher that specializes in wetland habitats and emergent insects. They're not rare by any stretch of the imagination. They're fairly common, but I think they're just really kind of graphic, that cool black and white patterning. You just don't see that much. We then went up north to Isla Salamanca National Park, and weirdly, the day we were there was no one there. We only saw a couple people. Having a national park to yourself, kind of cool. I can't remember exactly why. There was something going on why people weren't there. So we bird all over the place, and they had these cool boardwalks out into the swamp and the marsh and kind of like the coastal mangrove right there. And we went up in this observation tower, and I'll show you some photos from it. But first, the signage was really neat. Okay? It's from the Colombian perspective versus my American perspective. So they were talking about our birds go to El Norte to nest, and then they come back to us. So we're always saying, oh, the birds, they go down the tropics, they come back to nest. It's all sort of perspective of how you look at it. It was kind of some neat wording on it. I spent 13 years studying prothonotary warblers, and walking out that boardwalk, I saw prothonotary warbler, and I was like, prothonotary warbler, and Osvaldo was like, oh, yeah, they're a neat bird. I'm like, no, you have no idea. I've banded thousands of these things. They're one of my study species. Then he got super excited. He's like, you banded prothonotary warblers? All right, so anywhere around aquatic habitat, lakes, rivers, marshes, you're going to find this species of raptor, the black-collared hawk. And it's widespread in the tropics. It's a little bit like our red-shouldered hawk. You know, so you often see them around water. They kind of have a similar behavior. These guys can even osprey-type fish catch out of the water, so they're a pretty nifty raptor. This one's not fully plumaged. The full adult will have this bright reddish brown color. This one's still molting in a lot, but they're going to have this black collar right here. So standing on the tower, one flew in and perched on a tree about 40, 50 feet away and got a little picture made. One of the target birds at Salamanca was another endemic hummingbird. This is the sapphire-bellied hummingbird. And they like these kind of coastal, wetland, marshy swamp areas. And this one came out and had bathed in a pool of water, and it was drying off and preening. And so again, it lingered. And so the qualifier is that you see dozens of hummingbirds that just whiz by you, land, go, like you have no chance of getting pictures or anything. So it's so cool when one perches up and kind of shows. It migrates through Oklahoma. Solitary sandpiper, good. Yeah, you see the white eye-ring, the black and white barring on the tail, kind of greenish legs. It's in the Arctic neotropical migrant. We typically think of like tanagers or warblers migrant, but sandpipers are in the Arctic neotropical. They nest up in the Arctic tundra. They winter in northern Colombia. So walking down the trail, you're like, oh, there's a solitary sandpiper. And it's by itself, so, you know, seems appropriate. This was in like January, December. I'm like, come March, I'll see you again. Very primitive bird. Yeah, lots of little ground lizards and skinks and stuff running around. I try to throw in a few things once in a while. Surprisingly, it was a non-butterfly trip. A lot of times in the try to see lots of butterflies. There weren't very many butterflies in Colombia on that trip. Yellow-headed caracara. This is a fairly common open area species in the tropics. This one flew into the same tree the black-collared hawk was on. And so had kind of dueling big birds here. So we then drove east over to Tayrona National Park. And we had a very special target bird. So I'm going to give you the narrative. Spent the first 4.5 hours trudging off trail, walking through all the the streams, mud, crawling over down logs, bushwhacking through dense understory. Lost a part off my freaking binocular for the rest of the trip. You know that rubber piece that covers the metal ring of your binoculars? So I had to put a metal ring into my eye the rest of the trip to look through my binoculars. That was fun. Small clouds of mosquitoes following you everywhere, all looking for the tracks of a particular bird. This, no, not blue curacao, blue-billed curacao. That's it. Yeah. This is a critically endangered species. They've basically been hunted near to extinction. The only place they're left is on a couple little national parks and reserves, and they're protected in there. But curassows, they're like turkeys. They basically across much of the tropics have just been wiped out anywhere they encounter people. So a number of these species are critically endangered, and it's endemic to northern Colombia. Look at the vegetation density. You know, I'm talking about you're trudging and crawling around there. That's what it's like. And we never saw the tracks. We just saw the bird all of a sudden. And it was watching us. We're watching it. Not a very good view, is it?
Oh.
That's better.
Wow.
Another time I've stolen a picture from the internet. I have no idea how the photographer got this bird out in the open. The ones we saw were deep ninja mode, like they were nowhere near going to an open area. But you see the structure, it's basically like a ground turkey. You see this cool blue in the bill, real pretty black. There's a white spotting on the tail, a little bit of white vent. And, you know, it was one you go there and I was always like, are we gonna see this? He's like, maybe. You know, it's like, you know, birding isn't guaranteed. It's like, sometimes you see birds, sometimes you don't. But we were really excited to just have an experience with the bird, and then we got out of there. So didn't want to bother him too much. Then we kind of went to the big highlight portion of this trip, which is the Santa Marta Mountains. I mentioned earlier they're this kind of isolated branch off the Andes. So they're endemic central. The birds that came out of the Andes that went to the Santa Martas genetically are going to mutate over time, called allopatric speciation, and they're going to diverge into different species. And so in the Santa Marta Mountains, there's 50 plus endemic or near endemic species, meaning a couple of them get just barely into Venezuela. But the bulk of them are just in the Santa Marta Mountains, right there by the border. And we saw 20 endemic species alone in 3 days. So that was pretty target oriented. We really wanted to see these specialties. For this trip, saw 39 of the 87 endemic species to Colombia, and 57 of 108 near endemics. So we saw a lot of really specialized birds. And that was, as an ornithologist, I was interested in seeing these kind of products of allopatric speciation. So we stayed at a reserve. There's a little lodge inside the park. We had a local guide and driver you had to have with you here as well. This was the view outside my cabin.
Wow.
Yeah, you actually hike a trail out to your cabin on the mountain edge. And so, not a shabby view.
Yeah.
The cabin wasn't much to look at, but the view, location. Now, what's really also interesting here is, yeah, we were going to go out and hike and bird and all this stuff. If you take a 3-day horse and mule packing trip up to these higher portions of the Santa Martas, there's 3 more endemic bird species. We didn't have time to do that, but I would have totally done it if we could have done it. You know, you're talking zero access, no roads, no nothing, just basically burrow packing in. I was like, oh, that sounds good. So yeah, this is just, you see all the different vegetation layers, you see the different mountain portions. This is the Caribbean in the distance. So you're right up on the mountains, just basically go right into the ocean. And because you're at elevation, you're often in the clouds, and that makes for birding challenges. You know, you won't be able to see these nice open views. And things like this you can walk right by. So in a tree cavity, there's a scarlet-fronted parakeet. Never made a sound. You would just kind of watch you walk by. So you can't see me in the clouds in the cavity, but we see you. Lots and lots of parrots and parakeets in Colombia. If you're collecting those, you gotta have wheels. Roads are all like, see all these rocks. You're just driving over all that all day. It's pretty rough stuff, but that's how you get around. Got a knoll, A-N-O-L-E, knoll doing his little dewlap and push-ups. Saw him up there. Not used to seeing skinks at 12,000 feet, but okay. This is a cool one. This is a band-tailed guan, G-U-A-N, guan. They have this red throat patch, kind of like a turkey, the waddle. It's brown and white. Was eating these fruits. We went eye to eye. It was like, oh, hello, how are you? We need a better picture. Yeah, that's better. So I waited a little bit, nudge angles a little bit, and pretty soon it comes out on a nice branch. You see the band on the terminal band of the tail, big pink legs and feet, and they walk around on the branches. They're arboreal. They're not ground dwellers, so they just walk around the branches. They're weak flyers. They just kind of fly tree to tree very close. In a way, it's kind of like what we think Archaeopteryx and some of the primitive birds were like. They're not directly related, but they're similar behaviorally. Cheap photo. This is my photo, but they had a little seed feeder out by the lodge, and these are black-fronted wood quail. And wood quails are super secretive. They again like that skulking understory. Look at all the brown, black, and all that. Imagine that in a bunch of dead leaf litter underneath a tropical forest. Good luck seeing them. You could walk right by 2 feet away and never know they're there. And we did see them walking across trails a couple times, but these came out to the feeder for a little bit. I'm like, I'm going to get a picture. What the heck? Because you rarely get to see wood quails. You hear them out in the woods all the time, but it's always fun to see them. Special. We need to get our hummingbird on here. Now, some of you may have seen this one before. If you've been in the tropics or occasionally here in the U.S., this is now called the lesser violet ear. So it's a green hummingbird with a little violet ear. Actually, they split it. Now we get Mexican violet ear in Central America and Mexico. This is lesser in South America. And the brown violet ear. So brown, nice little violet ear projection. A common species at this elevation is crowned wood nymph. I think it's one of the more spectacular hummingbirds. This brilliant purplish violet on the head and on the breast. You have this cool scaly green gorget. It's hard to say. It's kind of like a cardinal. Cardinals are so pretty, but after a while, you're like, oh, that bird's in my backyard. Same thing with this one. You're like, oh, they're so gorgeous. Wait, here's a different bird. You get used to them pretty quickly. But this was the target hummingbird up at Santa Marta Mountains. Endemic, the white-tailed star frontlet. And check out this spectacular blue and green crown, gorget, the long white tail feathers. And they're only found at the tops of these mountains in that range. Here's one in a stare down with violet crowned wood nymph. He's got position, he's winning. And you see, like, it looks like turquoise on top of the head. Absolutely spectacular tail there. This was off to the side, but they had some feeders up, and they would occasionally come in there, and me and John and the other two go with were very, very respectful of the distance, looking at the birds. And there was like a 12-year-old kid with a family that was staying at the same place. And he took his cell phone and walked right up to a bird feeder, like this far away, and would take pictures of the hummingbirds. We're like, why didn't we think of that? Kids have no barriers, right? They're like, oh, I'm just gonna get closer. But hummingbirds were used to people, so it was kind of neat to watch that kid. He was so excited to get videos of hummingbirds. I was like, get that kid an ornithology degree quick. It's a trogon. This is masked trogon, and it's a female. And they're another one that often sit very quietly in the forest. You can walk right by them. And even though they're brightly colored, you can still walk by them. So check out her barring on the tail, this beautiful red belly, the white breastband. Both males and females have this. She's kind of a brownish color here. The black masking, the thin, triangular orange bill. They often sit on branches and they'll jump up and pluck fruit from above them or grab insects. And this is one of the smaller trogons. Here she is from the side. Yeah, they're kind of cute. They're kind of pudgy looking. She has this cool white comma behind the eye, and you get a real sense of how the bill looks from underneath to from the side. It's just a little bit different. Here's her boyfriend. While watching her, it's one of those like, oh, look 5 feet above her. Here's the boyfriend. See his tail. Again, the red, white, and green. I guess he's like the Christmas color bird now for this time of year. He wouldn't really kind of tilt his head down and look at us, but he was kind of keeping an eye out on things. Jim, you were asking about birds made from Panama. Rufous-tailed jacamar is found in, you may have seen it there. So, whoops, I hit the wrong button. I'm going the wrong way. Okay, how do I go back? There we go. So jacamars have almost like a kingfisher-like bill, but they do mostly fly catching. They'll jump out and grab big insects from these perches, and really neat iridescent greens and the rufous colors. I really like the framing geometry from a photography standpoint. You have the branch angling this way, the bird kind of does the X marks the spot crossover. It all just kind of works out. It's pleasing to the eye, it's all kind of framed. Yay me. Oh yeah. This is the endemic Santa Marta parakeet. And again, they're only found at this really high elevation Santa Martas. So we went up there, we spent most of the morning hiking, went back to the vehicle, they flew in and landed by the vehicle. Again, sometimes it just turns right. We earned it though, we spent hours searching for them in the clouds and everything. I'm calling this kind of like the Jackson Pollock of parakeets. Look at the little almost like pointillist colors on it. You know, you've got a little pinkish patch in the auricular, you got a little red and yellow here, you got some white, you have yellowish here, a little orangish here, blue in the wings, just little dribs and drabs of color everywhere. I'm about 60 feet away here. I'm not that close, as the zoom in on the camera shows. But we were definitely getting watched. It was there's something in our territory that's not normally here. Look. This is the Santa Marta toucanet. It's part of the Emerald toucanet group. They have split these guys off. So if you've seen emerald toucanets in Central America or South America, there's multiple species they found after doing genetic studies. And this one's isolated in the mountains. Backlit, but you get an idea of just how big the bill is. And they're about the size of like a fish crow. They're pretty chunky. Yeah, sunset from the porch, not bad. I'm really putting this photo in also for this tree, or these two trees right here. They're called cecropia trees. Some of you may have heard. And for birders, they're really nice because a lot of the trees there have really dense leafy vegetation. It's hard to see the birds moving in around it. But notice how they have these individual kind of banana-shaped leaves, and you can often see birds perch in cecropias. So I always go for the low-hanging fruit. Look at the trees where you're most likely to see the cool bird first, then start looking for the really hard-to-find stuff in the other vegetation because good things happen in cecropia trees. All right, so the last portion of the 2018 trip was the Guajira Peninsula, and it's so unlike what you expect from a tropical country. As you go out this peninsula, it gets drier and drier. It turns into scrub, shrub, thorn, desert-like environment. When you think tropics, you think lush rainforest. Just the opposite. So driving down the highway, we did what I call a suicide stop. Two-lane highway, high-speed traffic, trucks whizzing by, blue-crowned parakeets flew across the road and perched right on the side of the road. So we jumped out in the middle of traffic like maniac idiots, but they were right there. So we got these great views of blue-crowned parakeet. Was at the National Lampoon's Vacation where they're like, we haven't even looked at the Grand Canyon. He's like, okay, let's look. All right, time to go. You know, like 2 seconds and you're out of there.
Oh.
Yeah, they're cute, aren't they? These are green-rumped parrotlets, and they're miniature. They're little parrots about this big. And you usually see them where they blend in with leaves in the forest, and a flock will emerge 15, 20, 30 of them in this bright green cloud and disappear. But out on the peninsula, this kind of acacia-like scrub, this was a nesting pair sitting out in the open. So we got to have an extended look at parrotlets. They weren't flying away. We were definitely being watched. These guys can see, they're like, what are you doing? This one has a little bit of yellow on the top of the head. This one just has the green.
Oh,
Somebody got it.
cat bird.
It's a cat
Oh.
on a hot tin roof.
Oh.
I took that and went, it's grown worthy. I know it's going to be. Although catbird is really good too. I like that. In birding, sometimes you hear some people talk about a nemesis bird, a bird you've looked for a long time and have never seen, you finally see it. This was my nemesis for the trip. Double-striped thick knee. And they're essentially a gigantic plover, like a killdeer. And They're mainly nocturnal. They basically go out at dawn and dusk and through the night, and they hunt for insects at night. So it's almost like a ground owl, if you will. Look how large the eye is. Okay, the side of that's for picking up all that light at night to see. I think they also have excellent hearing to hear things running around on the ground, and possibly even use sense of smell to find their prey. That's not been documented, but I think it's probably true. Very well camouflaged for the daytime when they're sleeping and resting in this kind of scrubby. This bird's about 150 feet out into that scrubby, grassy stuff in broad daylight. And I have seen other thickeys in Australia, New Guinea, Europe, everywhere. But the one in my own hemisphere I've looked at since, I don't know, technically 20 plus years, finally found it in 2018. I was like, ah. And my birding friend, John, who I birded with a lot, I was like, oh, finally. I was in Nevis, I got the life bird on that finally. And he's like, you're kidding. He's like, there's no way you haven't seen it in all these years. I'm like, sometimes you just miss something. And so it was very gratifying for me, just kind of a goofy birding thing. Yeah, you just perch out in the open. This bird occurs in the United States, not so much in Oklahoma, a little farther southwest. Brown crested flycatcher. It might ring a bell or two. It's another Mearchus, like the gray crested or the ash-throated. Big brown crest, heavy bill, and this was it's a resident bird there. So this one's kind of hiding in the shadows. He came out a little bit more and investigated, but I really like that photo. Got a little shadow on him, but he's kind of investigating. A bird you can see in Arizona, you see in Colombia, it just kind of has this weird vibe to it. This is where we found the the chestnut piculet on the Gohira Peninsula. So this was the opening title slide, but this is a different angle photo. And, it was very accommodating. It was late afternoon. Yeah, it's stunning. Same portion of habitat, this real dry woody scrub. This is an Orinocan or Orinoco saltator. So kind of like a grosbeak or a cardinal, they have this really large bill. It's got a big heavy bill. It's got a white stripe here, a black face. Here's from the side. Do you want to put your finger in there? Me either. These bite hard. They can hurt you. They're very heavy, powerful billed birds. I've handled saltators in Central America. I can testify firsthand. Put your finger in a nutcracker and just crunch down. It's what it feels like. They are not playing around. Probably why they're successful as a group of birds. Same basic hike in the scrub. We found white-whiskered spinetail. Spinetails look kind of like wrens, kind of like your Carolina wren, and they like understory vegetation, often very skulking. They hide a lot. But in this dry scrub, this one was very easy to see. And we figured out pretty quickly why it was easy to see it. We found the nest. So it looks kind of like just a whole bunch of sticks jumbled in with a bunch of other sticks. That's about a 2 foot across nest that it was going in and out of. So I guess hiding in plain sight. 2 parts to this photo. The bird is a pileated finch. It's got a little crest here laid down. It looks like a black stripe. They can lift up. Looks like a tufted titmouse, kind of an appearance. What's the other thing in the photo? Trash. Blowing plastic bags everywhere. And there was a secondary reason for it. In Venezuela, they're having all sorts of trouble over there. Huge number of refugees were entering the Gohira Peninsula, and they were just living out in the landscape, and there was just trash everywhere. It was just a big humanitarian mess, unfortunately. There it is, drinking water. You see the black crest. It actually has a red tip right here. It's a little tough to see. I would not drink that water, by the way. Who knows what's in that water. Actually look a little familiar. This is a vermilion cardinal. It's very closely related to our northern cardinal. You see the same shape and color. The crest is actually taller and thinner. Bill's kind of a palish pink and no black mask on it. And if you listen to their song, you can hear the cardinal elements to the song. It still has that kind of cardinal cheer. It has that built into the songs that it has. Look at that. That's a sexy bird right there. Now, I'd be loath if I didn't touch base on Nearctic neotropical migrants. Those are the ones that nest up here in the US and Canada, migrate to the tropics for the winter. And on that first trip, saw 40 species of Nearctic neotropical migrants, including my favorite prothonotary warbler here, the flying lemon, the eastern kingbird. We saw big flocks of those, actually. Blackbirdian warbler, which is kind of rare in Oklahoma, is common in this part of northern South America in winter. So it's weird to be like, oh, another Blackbirdian warbler. Which if I saw it here in my yard, I'd be like, everybody, Blackbirdian warbler. You know? So it's good to see these guys. Lots and lots of Swainson's thrushes. It's a common species. It's also weird, but Swainson's thrushes are like a deep forest bird, but they're in people's yards in Colombia. They get pushed out of the forest by their residents, so they forage in the middle of towns and things, like things you wouldn't see here typically. By the way, the guides often get really excited about the migrants, because they don't see them for a long time, and they often are looking for rare warblers. Birds that are common for us would be exciting and rare for them. All right, the shorter trip in 2019, spent a little bit of time right outside Bogota when we first got there. This is a golden-fronted white start. It's a warbler, and they've got a variety of different warblers down there at different elevations, and so we hiked some trails on the slope. It's not the best picture, but you get this really neat black, white, and yellow bird. Resident warblers. Now, Osvaldo, he got us some special access. He knew a landowner that had a rare antpitta called the Cundinamarca antpitta. And this is not on eBird. This is not marked on maps. It's just a would let him bring people on very discreetly. So we didn't, no markings of where it was or anything like that. He didn't want a bunch of people traipsing him, but he trusted Osvaldo. So sometimes those personal connections. So we had to park and hike all the way up in here. We did find the Cundinamarca antpitta after about 2 hours, and amazing birding underneath us. It was like all cloudy and primordial and damp and crawling over stuff. It was really neat. But notice the rest of his property, it's all been converted for livestock grazing. So this landowner is protecting some, but using the rest to make money off of. So I'm willing to make that trade every time though, because the alternative is they wipe all of this out and it all goes to goats and llamas and cows and no birds, or very few birds.
Did he charge you all a fee to come onto his property?
Incredibly exorbitant. About $5 a head for 3 people. 15 bucks. I was like, he knows he could charge 100 for most birders from that probably, right? You don't tell him that after you see the bird though, don't tell him before. This is actually a different property. We actually made lunch at this place, and the wife made us lunch. She brought out lunch. I ate the whole lunch. It was the appetizer. Then she brought out an even larger plate of food. I'm like, I just ate a whole huge meal. She's like, no, this is the meal. I'm like, oh boy, you got a to-go box. But same thing. This landowner, if you paid a few bucks to get in, we bought lunch with it, and then he let us go up into his property back here. Just there was 3 total of us. But you can see how the rest of the landscape is completely altered. And so these are the last remaining fragments. So for conservation groups, if you want to target something, you won't be able to come in and create like a conservation easement or buy that, turn that into a reserve. You can still monetize this, but ultimately, countries like Ecuador and others, they bought landowners' property like this, pay them top dollar, often with internationally raised money, and they put that in a protected reserve and hire somebody to protect it. And that's kind of modern conservation in the tropics now. That's probably where it's going to stay. This is a higher elevation kind of neat bird called red-crested cotingas. Cotingas are often bright blues and things like that. These are very subtle gray birds with a little bit of a red crest on the back of the head here. And this one's preening. And I'd seen them before, but only once before. So it's kind of neat to see this species again on his property. While looking at different birds, heard scruffling around on the ground in front of me, slaty brushfinch sneaking through the understory. Not the best picture, but good luck getting a good picture of this guy. It was running along like a mouse on the ground. So I was just happy to even get that. And brushfinches are usually little higher elevation species for the most part. Love this one. Scarlet-bellied mountain tanager. They're quite common at a certain higher elevation band. And there's a whole group called the mountain tanagers. Most of them are like black and yellow, blue, black, and yellow. And then there's suddenly this enormous red and black one, totally different than the others. But they're pretty neat. First time I ever got a picture of one, I was super excited. Now, on the way back to Bogota, before we flew down into the Amazon, we stopped at a woman. She had a place, like a little hotel lodge, and she had a whole bunch of hummingbird feeders. And so you go and she made us tea and cookies and everything, and we looked at her hummingbirds. This is a black-tailed train bearer. This is the tail, down to here. Yeah, so its tail's about that long. It's pretty impressive. And there's 2 species of these types of train bearers. And yeah, just need to see that really long tail. Now this is a female blue-throated star-frontlet. We saw a white-tailed star-frontlet earlier. This is a different species. And she's got this kind of, magenta iridescence, real speckled, come in the feeder. This is her boyfriend. And he's got these deep, rich, really fascinating colors. He's got the green, the black. You see the some violet or pinkish magenta in here. He's got a little bit of the blue throat patch. Notice the bill curves upwards a little. Not very typical. Most birds have straight or decurved bills, but if you actually curve upwards, it's called recurved. Here's with his chin tucked down. Look at that. That's some sexy color right there. Good sized. Star frontlets are a little bit bigger too. You can see it's a pretty good sized one. I just love that. You see those white little puff legs here. Gorget patch. And that was the highlight bird we were looking for at this one, so that was pretty neat. This is one of my all-time favorite hummingbirds. So here's the body, and this is the sword-billed hummingbird. That's a long sword. In fact, it's the only bird in the world whose bill is longer than its body. And when they fly, you guys have heard drones? They sound like that when they fly by. They make this real weird whirring sound. And this one was kind of looking around and getting weird angles, so I just kept shooting pictures till I got a neat one. And usually they're even at higher elevation than this site. I was actually kind of surprised to see them this low. All right, so then we jumped in the plane, flew down to Mitu. This is in the Amazon lowlands, so this river you see here goes all the way down to the Amazon and drains into the Atlantic Ocean, a long way away. So it's pronounced Mitu, which is a little town along the river airstrip. You can see a few little mountain residuals here. Even though it's flattened out, it's less than 250 meters of elevation, so under 750 feet, you still find it keeps these little basalt rock formations. And we went to this one because there's supposed to be a colony of Guianan cock of the rocks, which are these absolutely ridiculous birds. This guy.
Oh.
Yeah. It's like some street punk rock graffiti artist took over a bird, and they're amazing. So we went there. I'd seen Andean cock of the rock in Ecuador and some other places. I really want to see the other species, and these are orange. The other ones are red. And we got there, and the colony was gone. So we were Guianan cock of the rock blocked, I guess. Yeah, sorry, that was bad. We went to the second site, money. The other colony was intact. I took some videos. I got some crappy pictures, but I stole this off the internet because you just had to get that word. They're just amazing. This is the male. Females are cryptic. And they're very wary because people hunt them and try to collect them. So a lot of times they shift colonies and they can be hard to find. But when you find them, price of admission, well earned. Barefaced ibis. Along these wet areas, you'll find this one was given a, what are you looking at? Was that like De Niro? You looking at me? Yeah, I was looking at you. So here it is in full profile. You see this wonderful decurved pink bill. You see the mud on it, where it's headed down in the mud getting invertebrates. Barefaced ibis. Another common species along the rivers is Amazon kingfisher. So from basically Central America down, it's about the size of the belted kingfisher. It's kind of a chunky green and white kingfisher, and this one actually has a fish in its bill. It's a little hard to see. Amazonian moth. We have Andean, now we have Amazonian down level. This is a split. They used to be considered the same species, but they found they really are genetically isolated from each other, even though they look similar. This was a bird I really wanted to see. It's called the azure crested jay. And Some of the jays in the tropics are super secretive. This one is not. They live in big, raucous family groups, and we were able to tie into a flock. And this was kind of like the sentinel. He went up on the top of the tree and kind of kept an eye on us, and everybody else kept going back into the forest. The azure is kind of hard to see. It actually is kind of like a whitish gray on the top and back of the head, but in the right light, it'll kind of pop a bluish purple color. It's really pretty extravagant. The yellow eye. His tail's a mess. There's all sorts of work that needs to get done there. But we'll forgive him. You know, he showed nicely here. Those toes are needle sharp, also, by the way. Blue jays, things like they have a really sharp toe. Fun fact. Another jacamar. This was bronzy jacamar, perched over a stream, and the bronzy is kind of infused in with the green, but in full sunlight, they can kind of pop this really, really pretty bronzy color. Look at this really snazzy bill, sharp, pointy. A group of locals were hiking by, and we were clearly a surprise to them. They're like, so our local guide, she was a female guide, she quickly in indigenous tongue spoke to them like, you know, they're with me, it's okay. You know, we're looking at birds. They were like, okay, whatever. They looked kind of, this was something new. Now, one thing we really wanted to visit was the white sand forest. And so this is actual white sand. It's not, we're not even entirely sure how white sand forest formed. There's speculation it might be old coastal dunes that as they moved away from the ocean, they were kind of left behind and flattened out. But there's other ways to get white sand. There's different, so we're not really even sure how it got there, but this whole area has this very specialized type of soil. And all the vegetation here is very different than other Amazonian rainforest vegetation. So they're adapted to this soil type. And then you've got bird communities within that. So this is an area of a lot of study in ecology and other things, trying to learn more about this. I love this bird. It's not the best picture, but I was excited to see it. It's called a great jacamar, and it's a very big, chunky bird and a big, heavy bill. And our female guide from the tribe, she told us a really neat story. She said when she was a little girl, the tribal women would always say that if you were pregnant and you saw great jacamar, you would lose your baby. So you should never try to look at this bird. She goes, well, I have 2 children now, and I see these on a frequent basis. She's like, so I know, I love my grandmother, but she's not right about that one. And she's like, you know, we learn, we figure different things out. But she had been trained as a birding guide. She was exceptional, outstanding language skills, you know, and this is how they earned revenue for their tribe was, you know, they had other, you know, agriculture and things, but they learned that ecotourism could be a sustainable revenue stream. And a little bit of money goes a long way in these situations. You know, if you pay $20 for something, that might be like giving somebody here $200 or $2,000 comparatively. So a little bit of money can go a long way in these communities, which is why conservation is important. This is a smooth-billed ani, which are common in this area. They're a type of cuckoo. Anis, you can see there's the smooth bill. And while watching one cuckoo, the other cuckoo flew in right near it. This is a squirrel cuckoo. If you've been in the tropics before, you'll know squirrel cuckoos are fairly widely distributed. Jim Deming nodding. Anywhere from basically Mexico down, you can see these guys, and they're big cuckoos. They get their name from their coloration. You got a red eye, a yellowish green bill. It was a 2 cuckoo moment. This is also a common bird throughout the tropics. It's called a yellow-bellied alania. See the yellow here. And alanias are a type of flycatcher. There's multiple species of them, and this is easily the most widespread. I really love the geometry and the framing of this, that hooked branch, the bird looking down into it. It just all kind of comes together for me, compositionally. Frogs making more frogs. The technical term they call frog is amplexus. The female grasps the female, so as she lays the eggs, he directly fertilizes them. It creates an egg case in the water. And notice the size differential. Female has a much bigger body mass for generating literally thousands of eggs, or at least high hundreds of eggs. Sperm production is pretty cheap, so I guess you don't need to be as big as a frog. So it's a cool photo. I only got one mannequin photo in this. There's usually a fair number of mannequin species that you see, and they're these kind of little egg-shaped guys. This is a blue-crowned mannequin, obviously named, and they often have lekking, like prairie chickens, where the males all gather and display for females, and they have these really crazy dances and snapping calls, and You can go on YouTube and watch all sorts of cool videos about manakins. Some of you, I think, already have. And they are every bit as good in the field as they are in those videos, especially if you find a leg. I'm very partial to this photo. The bird is a male blue ground dove. It's about the size of an Inca dove. This is a small dove. They're often very secretive. The first one I saw was a flyby in Panama. It just flew by. I could tell it was blue. And I was like, okay, that was a blue ground dove. This is the first time I've ever seen one sit still, much less perch up for a few minutes. And so even though it has a stick running right through the top of the head, I don't care. I was like, yeah, I got a picture of blue ground dove. The female is actually over here. She looks kind of a reddish brown, very camouflaged. But they gave us a couple minutes of look-see and then poof, gone into the forest. Gotta have a vulture in here. This is greater yellow-headed vulture. So take a turkey vulture, make it bigger with a yellow head. There you go. Massive feet perched up on a stem. Red-throated caracara. This was one we did a huge, hot, humid hike all the way down a river. Never saw him. Went and did another big hike up the river. Finally found them. So it was gratifying to finally see them. You see the red throat, the kind of bluish yellow bill. Look at these gigantic feet, talons, nice little ankle cover here. Just a really neat looking caracara. Said we've seen other Celis genus woodpecker. This is scale-breasted woodpecker. Notice the head projection again. It's got the scaling all the way across, which the cinnamon does not. This is another one of those you can come around the corner in the trail and there's just one sitting 20 feet in front of you and you don't want to move. So this twiggage is not ideal, but I waited for it to move up into this opening. What did it do? Went around the back of the limb. Like, oh, you win. Oropendulas are bizarre. They are really cool plumage, lots of weird colors. They have kind of almost like grackle-like sounds that they make, weird displays. They hang upside down. They do all sorts of weird stuff. They're kind of like crazy kids. Look at all these colors on this green Oropendula. It's not green like Leprechaun Lucky Charms green, but it's kind of this olive green. The blue iris, the orange and yellow bill, yellow tail, rufous russet. Actually, it's more like russet underneath there. They're blue jay sized. They're pretty, even bigger than that. So saw green Oropendula. Couple minutes later, olive Oropendula. Two Oropendulas quickly. Much larger, similar patterning, yellow tail, russet. But look here, you have this olive yellow, big pink cheek patch and a black and orange bill. So first glance, they look similar. Second glance, you can see the differences. I was trying to get pictures of some other birds. And hear the little buzz, and a versicolored emerald lands 5-6 feet from my head. It's like, wow, that's good stuff. And we both kind of looked at each other and see this kind of bluish green down the back, white underneath. It's actually kind of a brownish wing. And emeralds are pretty small hummingbirds. And these trees have blossoms in the top. And there were a whole bunch of hummingbirds coming into these. I think we had like 7 or 8 species just in one tree, all at the same time. So, pretty exciting. Walking back to our vehicle, kids' soccer field. It's all grassy and everything. We're kind of done birding. We're all just jibber-jabbering, talking, not paying any attention. And then the ground starts moving. It's like, oh, there's dusky-billed parrotlets right in the middle of the kids' soccer field. They have a little kind of a dark gray to white bill here, greenish yellow. Look at the blend. As long as they held still, we probably walked by the whole flock and never noticed. There were like 30 of them all around us. And so we stopped and they started noting, they started sitting up and everything. But even walking back to the car, there's a live bird, and a hard one to get at that. That was it's the only time I've ever seen them in the middle of a kid's soccer field. Thought I'd save a pretty good one for last. This is the oddly named red fan parrot. And we hiked some serious bottomland tropical rainforests looking for these guys. We saw all sorts of wonderful woodpeckers and tanagers and all sorts of crazy stuff. And you start getting the idea you're not gonna see something, and you gotta push back against that creeping doubt. And I'm really bad about that. I'm like, oh, we're not gonna see. Took a break in the trail. Yep, there they are, right overhead. just sitting quietly. And so look at the size of this bill. They have this huge, heavy bill. The eyes kind of a yellowish color. They have this kind of fanned out streaking. And this is kind of a pinkish red that blends down. It's very chunky. I call it the linebacker of parrots. It looks real kind of chunky like a linebacker. Look at that bill. Spectacular. If you talk to the parrot people, a lot of times parrots are really misbehaved, and they'll put them in with red fan parrots in cages because the red fan parrots are like, I'm not having it, calm down. They literally calm down other birds. I don't know if it's because of their intimidation factor of the bill, or for some reason the people at zoos and stuff say they can calm parrots down by putting them in with the red fans. Luckily, red fan parrots are not big on the illegal pet trade circuit. They, for some reason, haven't caught the attention of the parrot poachers, so that's a good thing. Also, you have to go in the middle of the Amazon to find them. It's not easy to get to them. But I was just in awe of that bill. Is just amazing. And we watched them eat fruit for a little while. They would just slice open these really big fruits like nothing, right through the husks and everything. That bill's very sharp and powerful. So we'll end with a Plumbeous kite, perched up on a cecropia tree, of course. It looks like our Mississippi kite, except they've got these bronzy markings in the wing. It actually looks like a wing patch when they're flying. But otherwise, it's a dead ringer for a Mississippi kite. So that's my talk. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions, feel free to ask.